Today we're diving headfirst into the whirlwind world of globalization. Think of it like this: the world's become one giant garage sale. Globalization has brought us a smorgasbord of cheap goods. Remember when a flat-screen TV cost an arm and a leg? Now you can practically score one with a week's worth of coffee money. But hold on a second, because there's a catch. This global garage sale has come at a cost. It's like trading your grandma's antique watch for a shiny new smartwatch. Sure, the smartwatch is cool, but that watch held sentimental value, a connection to the past. The American landscape is changing, and not just because of climate change, though that's a whole other episode. We're shifting from a nation that primarily produces goods to one that provides services. Factories are closing down, manufacturing jobs are disappearing, and the service sector is exploding. But here's the kicker: those service jobs are just as vulnerable to the siren song of globalization. Customer service, tech support, even accounting, they're all being outsourced to countries with lower wages. So, where does that leave the American worker? Many are feeling left behind, like their skills and contributions are no longer valued. But don't despair just yet, because it's not all doom and gloom. We're a nation known for our resilience, our ability to adapt and innovate. Let's be honest, folks, who doesn't love a good bargain? Globalization has unleashed a tidal wave of affordable products. This abundance of affordable goods is like a siren song to consumers, and who can blame us? We're hardwired to seek out value. Globalization taps into this primal instinct, whispering promises of more for less. This access to affordable goods has had a profound impact on our quality of life. However, this access to a global marketplace has also fueled a culture of consumption, a relentless pursuit of the next big thing. It's a delicate dance between enjoying the fruits of globalization and not getting lost in a sea of stuff. Globalization hasn't just changed the way we shop, it's transformed us into global consumers. We're no longer limited by geographical boundaries, free to explore products and services from every corner of the world. This interconnectedness has created a ripple effect throughout the global economy. Emerging markets are finding their footing, fueled by the insatiable appetite of Western consumers. Small businesses, once confined to their local communities, are now able to reach a global audience. This rise of the global consumer has also led to increased competition, which, in theory, is a good thing. When businesses have to compete for our attention and our dollars, it forces them to innovate. However, this relentless pursuit of efficiency and cost savings can also have a dark side. It's a delicate balancing act, harnessing the power of globalization while ensuring that it benefits everyone. While consumers are busy snapping up bargains, investors are having a field day. Globalization has opened up a Pandora's box of investment opportunities, allowing them to diversify their portfolios. Now, with a few clicks of a mouse, investors can buy and sell stocks, bonds, and other assets from companies around the world. This influx of foreign capital has been a boon for many developing countries, providing much-needed investment. However, this global flow of capital is not without its risks. Remember the 2008 financial crisis? That was a stark reminder that globalization is a double-edged sword. But amidst this global shopping spree, there's a growing unease. The American middle class, once the envy of the world, is shrinking. Those stable, well-paying manufacturing jobs that form the backbone of our economy have been disappearing. And they're not just disappearing, they're being shipped overseas to countries with lower wages. This hollowing out of the middle class isn't just bad for those who've lost their jobs, it's bad for the entire economy. When people have less money to spend, businesses suffer, tax revenues decline, and the whole system starts to sputter. It's like a game of Jenga where someone keeps pulling out blocks from the middle. Now, some argue that this shift is just part of the natural evolution of the economy. They say that outsourcing low-skilled jobs to countries with lower wages allows us to focus on higher-value industries. Globalization has undoubtedly fueled innovation, creating entire industries that didn't exist a few decades ago. But here's the catch: not everyone benefits equally from this technological revolution. While Silicon Valley is booming, many Americans are being left behind. It's like being invited to a fancy dinner party but only being offered a plate of crackers while everyone else is feasting on caviar and champagne. So what's the solution? How do we bridge this growing divide and ensure that everyone has a shot at the American dream? Education is often touted as the great equalizer, the key to unlocking opportunity and upward mobility. A good education can open doors, expand horizons, and equip individuals with the skills and knowledge they need to thrive. But here's the problem. Our education system is failing to keep pace with the demands of the 21st century economy. We're still churning out graduates with skills that are quickly becoming obsolete. And as if globalization and outsourcing weren't enough to contend with, there's another force at play: automation. Robots, artificial intelligence, and other forms of automation are rapidly replacing human workers in a wide range of industries. Now, some argue that automation will ultimately create more jobs than it destroys. But here's the rub. This transition is never seamless, and it often leaves a trail of displaced workers in its wake. Those who lack the skills or the resources to adapt to these rapid technological advancements can find themselves struggling. It's like being a skilled artisan in the midst of the Industrial Revolution. Now, amidst this global economic dance-off, enter the tariffs. Remember those? Those pesky little taxes on imported goods. In recent years, tariffs have become less of a waltz and more of a full-blown tango, with the US leading the charge. It all started with the idea that we needed to protect American jobs and industries from those pesky foreigners. So, with a flick of his pen and a tweet heard around the world, Trump slapped tariffs on goods from China, Mexico, Canada, the European Union. It was like a global game of economic chicken, with each side waiting to see who would blink first. The Trump administration argued that these tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs and level the playing field. But here's the thing about tariffs: they're like a blunt instrument in a world that requires surgical precision. They often have unintended consequences, hurting the very people they're supposed to help. For example, those tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, they drove up the cost of steel for American manufacturers. And those tariffs on Chinese goods, they ended up costing American consumers billions of dollars in higher prices. Remember that global garage sale we talked about earlier? Well, those tariffs were like someone throwing a wrench into the gears. It's like trying to bake a cake with ingredients from all over the world, only to have someone start slapping tariffs on flour, sugar, and chocolate. Sure, you might still be able to cobble together some kind of dessert, but it's not going to be pretty, and it's definitely going to cost you more. And the irony of it all is that those tariffs didn't even achieve their intended goal of bringing back manufacturing jobs to the US. In fact, some studies showed that they actually led to job losses in certain sectors. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Or should we say, the extra zeros on your grocery bill? Because when it comes to tariffs, you, my friend, are the one footing the bill. Remember those cheap goods we talked about, the ones that globalization so generously dumped on our doorstep? Well, tariffs are like an unwelcome houseguest who eats all your snacks, uses up all the hot water, and then sends you the bill. Think about it. When the government slaps a tariff on imported goods, those costs don't just magically disappear. Businesses, those savvy masters of capitalism, aren't going to just absorb those costs and take a hit to their profits. Oh no, they're going to pass those costs right along to you, the consumer, in the form of higher prices. It's like a game of economic hot potato, and guess who gets burned? That's right, it's you. So, your new smartphone? Yeah, that tariff just added $100 to the price tag. Those cute shoes you've been eyeing, tariff surcharge. That flat-screen TV that's now as expensive as a used car. You guessed it, tariffs. It's enough to make you want to swear off shopping altogether and take up knitting with locally sourced yarn, though, knowing our luck, they'll probably slap a tariff on that too. And it's not just the immediate price hikes we have to worry about. These tariffs can have a ripple effect throughout the entire economy, disrupting supply chains, increasing production costs, and ultimately leading to slower economic growth. It's like a game of economic dominoes, where one falling tariff can trigger a chain reaction that topples entire industries. Now, proponents of tariffs will tell you that they are necessary to protect American jobs, to create a level playing field, and to punish those countries that engage in unfair trade practices. And while those are all noble goals, in reality, tariffs often backfire, hurting the very people they're supposed to help. Remember those tariffs on steel and aluminum imports? The ones that were supposed to revive the American steel industry? Well, they did lead to a temporary increase in domestic steel production, but they also drove up prices for American manufacturers who rely on steel, making their products less competitive globally and leading to job losses in those industries. It's like giving a blood transfusion to one part of the body while simultaneously draining blood from another. Sure, you might temporarily boost one area, but the overall health of the system suffers. And let's not forget about the retaliatory tariffs, because in the world of international trade, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. When we slap tariffs on goods from other countries, they don't just sit back and take it. Oh no, they retaliate with tariffs of their own, targeting our exports and hurting American businesses and farmers who rely on those markets. It's like a never-ending game of economic whack-a-mole where we try to address one trade imbalance, only to see another one pop up somewhere else. We impose tariffs on solar panels from China, and suddenly, we're facing retaliatory tariffs on soybeans from Iowa. We slap tariffs on steel from Canada, and they come back at us with tariffs on maple syrup and ketchup. Because, let's be honest, what's a pancake breakfast without a little bit of Canadian sweetness? This tit-for-tat tariff war is like a game of economic ping-pong, with businesses and consumers caught in the crossfire. And the worst part is there's no clear winner. Sure, we might score a few points here and there, but in the end everyone loses. Businesses face higher costs, consumers pay more for goods and services, and the global economy takes a hit. So, what's the alternative? Well, instead of resorting to these blunt, often counterproductive measures, we need to start thinking strategically about how to compete in a globalized world. We need to invest in education and training to equip American workers with the skills they need to succeed in the 21st century economy. We need to support innovation and entrepreneurship, fostering the creation of new industries and high-paying jobs. And perhaps most importantly, we need to engage in constructive dialogue with our trading partners, addressing legitimate concerns about unfair trade practices, while working together to create a more open, fair, and rules-based global trading system. Alright folks, it's time to break out the scorecards and see who's winning and who's losing in this global economic game. Remember those cheap goods that magically appeared on our shelves thanks to globalization? Well, someone was on the winning side of that equation, and it wasn't always the American worker. China, for example, has been on a tear, transforming itself from a sleepy giant into an economic powerhouse, largely on the backs of its manufacturing prowess and access to the insatiable American consumer market. They've become the world's factory floor, churning out everything from iPhones to sneakers to those little plastic toys that end up in Happy Meals. And while we've been busy snapping up those bargains, China has been quietly building its economy, investing in infrastructure, technology, and education. They're playing the long game, folks, and they're winning. Meanwhile, many American workers are left wondering what happened to their piece of the pie. It's like going to a potluck dinner where someone brings a giant steaming casserole that everyone devours, while you're left picking at a bowl of wilted lettuce. Sure, you contributed something, but you're not exactly feeling satisfied. Now, it's not just about China, of course. Multinational corporations, those globe-trotting behemoths with more tentacles than an octopus, have also been reaping the benefits of globalization. They've been able to arbitrage labor costs, shifting production to countries with lower wages and looser regulations, all in the name of maximizing profits. And who can blame them, really? They're playing by the rules of the game, a game where profit is king and shareholder value reigns supreme. But for the American worker, especially those without a college degree or specialized skills, it's been a tough pill to swallow. They're the ones who've seen their jobs disappear, their wages stagnate, and their communities hollowed out by factory closures. They're the ones who are struggling to make ends meet, to put food on the table, to afford healthcare, to cling to the remnants of the American dream that seems to be slipping further and further out of reach. It's like being on a sinking ship where the first-class passengers are sipping champagne on the upper deck, oblivious to the plight of those crammed into the steerage below. So what's the takeaway from all of this, folks? Should we just throw up our hands, build walls, both metaphorical and literal, and retreat into our own little economic bubbles? Well, as tempting as that might sound, it's not exactly a recipe for success in the 21st century. Globalization, like a runaway train, isn't slowing down anytime soon. The question is, how do we get on board and steer it in a direction that benefits everyone, not just the fortunate few? First things first. We need to ditch the outdated playbook of tariffs and trade wars. They might make for good sound bites and fiery campaign speeches, but in the real world, they're about as effective as trying to put out a fire with gasoline. Instead, we need a more nuanced approach, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of the global economy and the need for cooperation, not confrontation. Imagine a world where instead of slapping tariffs on each other's goods, countries work together to create a more level playing field, one with fair labor standards, environmental protections, and intellectual property rights. Imagine a world where trade agreements weren't just about maximizing profits for corporations, but also about creating opportunities for workers, protecting the environment, and promoting sustainable development. Now I know what you're thinking. That sounds nice and all, but it's never going to happen. And you're right, it won't be easy. It will require a fundamental shift in thinking, a willingness to move beyond the zero-sum game of winners and losers, and embrace a more collaborative approach to global trade. It will require us to invest in our workforce, to equip them with the skills and education they need to compete in a rapidly changing global economy. But most importantly, it will require us to remember that in this interconnected world, we're all in this together. The choices we make, the policies we support, the products we buy, they all have ripple effects that extend far beyond our borders. The question is, what kind of world do we want to create? One where the benefits of globalization are shared by all, or one where the gap between the haves and the have-nots continues to widen? The choice, as they say, is ours.